Welcome to the Legends Behind the Craft podcast, where we feature top leaders in the wine and craft beverage industry with your host, Drew Hendricks. Now, let's get started with the show.
Drew Thomas Hendricks here. I'm the host of the Legends Behind the Craft podcast, where I talk with leaders in the wine and craft beverage industry. Today's episode is sponsored by Barrels Ahead. Barrels Ahead, we work with you to implement a one-of-a-kind marketing strategy, one that highlights your authenticity, tells your story, and connects you with your ideal customers. In short, we help wineries and craft beverage producers unlock their story to unleash their revenue. Now, we recently just kicked off a new solution to help wine club members or help wineries re-engage with some of those wine club members that have dropped off and may have been members a couple years ago. If you're interested in trying to re-engage with some of your lost lists, give us a call and we can help you out. Today we have Bianca Harmon's joining us again. She's one of our D2C strategists. How's it going, Bianca?
It's going good, Drew. Excited to be here and talk with Erik today.
Yes, today we have Erik Miller on the show. He's the winemaker and founder of Kokomo Winery in the Dry Creek Valley region of Sonoma County. And he recently just launched a new winery called Breaking Bread Winery that's dedicated to natural wine. Welcome to the show, Erik.
Thanks for having me, guys. Super stoked to be here and tell you about my story.
Yeah, we are stoked to have you on. So, Erik, you herald from Indiana.
Yeah, the great old state of Indiana. People always say, God, don't you miss it? I do. I miss the people. I love the people of the Midwest. The weather you can take and the topography. I graduated from Purdue University in 99. And I think it was 1997. I came out to California on a spring break and fell in love and decided, you know what? I'm moving there when I graduate. And what's interesting, it wasn't, people I think hear my story and they always go right to, wow, you moved out there for wine and you made your dream come true and so on. It's like, well, I didn't move out here with the aspirations of owning a winery or even being in the wine industry. I moved to California for what I call quality of life and, better weather, better topography. And I knew that the time to do that was right out of college before the cost of living thing really crept up on me. So I did that right after I graduated from Purdue. Moved out here and I have a business degree from Purdue. So I said, well, I got to find a job. So I was looking at ads in the paper at that time, for jobs, or maybe it was Monster or one of those things, but it was before some of today's technology finding jobs anyway. But I found a job doing finance. And I remember kind of like that first day of work, I come in, I got the suit and tie kind of thing on. And I'm pretty excited and like, wow, I've made it, 2 weeks in, I was kind of like, I don't know, man, this isn't me. I don't know if this is me, this is, I'm not a suit and tie kind of guy,
Yeah.
So anyway, right about that time, my girlfriend that I moved out with from Purdue got a job in a tasting room, Belvedere Winery, which used to be around in Russian River.
Is that where, did you locate to the Russian River right when you moved
Santa Rosa?
Santa Rosa, okay.
Yep. Santa Rosa was the town that I wanted to move to. And I, really thought that was a town big enough that I could find a job, but smaller than San Francisco. I was a little bit intimidated, Midwest guy, to move to such a big city like San Francisco. So I thought Santa Rosa would be a good fit. So yeah, she took that job as assistant tasting room manager at Belvedere Winery. And I think it was, like I said, about 2-3 weeks into my job, she says, hey, we're hiring for harvest help. So what's very commonplace in the wine industry is getting ready to come up now in August. So is that we hire harvest interns. It's a lot of work that all happens at once when we bring in all the grapes and do harvest. So we're always looking for, temporary help for that. So I said, wow, that's interesting. That's an interesting opportunity. I stewed on that for, I think, another week or so. And I said, you know what? I think I'm going to put this finance thing on hold. I want to do a 2-month stint and work harvest. I did that. I worked at Belvedere there. And I think I was on the job for not even a week, maybe a week, when I contacted UC Davis and said, hey, I'm going to go back to school for winemaking. I had no clue coming from Kokomo, Indiana, that you could be a winemaker as a major in college. And like, I mean, you're just not hip to that being from Indiana, right? That would even be a possibility. So, yeah, I did that, and I worked that harvest, completed that harvest. I got hit a little bit with, hey, you don't have quite the prerequisites to go into this master's program for enology. So I had to take some chemistry classes, at the JC to get those prerequisites met. I kind of got disenchanted at that time a little bit of like going for that full degree, and decided, you know what, I can't miss a harvest and be in a classroom. So then I went to work at a really small winery that was in a barn, and got a whole different side of winemaking. Still obviously fermenting grapes like we do, but done in I'll never forget being a Belvedere, and the winemaker gave me that classic quote that you hear in our industry is, you know how to make $1 million in this industry? Start with 5 million. Yeah. So, and that's kind of what people think about of our industry, because it's like you see all this shiny stainless steel and all this equipment and so on. And no doubt it does take some money, but we were making wine in this barn, and we were using all open top fermenters, doing all punch downs. We didn't have a single stainless tank. We had poly tanks that we'd bottle out of. And it really opened my eyes up to, a way, and we were still making world-class wine, right? So our wine was still like, getting top honors and so on. So that was really cool for me to kind of see that and to really work in a small winery that I got to see all aspects. We were about 3/4 of the way through harvest that year in 2004, which was that second year working at this small winery. And the farmer comes up, because we were on this 140-acre vineyard. And the farmer says, hey, I have some Cabernet that's unsold, this year. And I'm kind of like, the guy from Indiana is like, wow, I didn't realize you would have unsold grapes. I figured they were all sold. That happens in our industry. So his solution was like, hey, because I don't have a buyer for it, and obviously grapes are very perishable, we'll make it into bulk wine, and then I'll have wine that I can sell, or an item I could sell for multiple months or even over a year if you have bulk wine, because it's, of course, not as perishable as fresh grapes. So we were making this wine that we brought in, or making these, this Cabernet that we brought in the grapes, and knowing at that time that it wasn't going to be for our program. And I was just kind of like, wow, what are we selling it for? So I talked to the farmer. I ended up negotiating a deal where I was like, I took a portion of that Cabernet that year and turned it into
finance background comes in. You're able to get the economics of that.
Yeah, economics were interesting. Speaking of that, I took the plunge. I made 20 barrels, I think, of Cabernet that first year in 2004 for Kokomo, one SKU. And then you go like, okay, now the fun part. How do you sell this?
I gotta sell this.
Right? As we know in our industry, making wine's tough enough, but selling it might even be a little more difficult. So luckily, I named this thing Kokomo after my hometown, Kokomo, Indiana, which was a very gutsy move. I'll tell you that now. Kokomo is a very blue-collar town.
Now, how did the town get its name?
The town got its named after an Indian chief.
I would say it had to be something Indian related.
Right. And then here comes this song by the Beach Boys in the 80s.
Yeah.
Way down in Kokomo. Right. And so, man, everyone's just sure that I named it after this Beach Boys song. And of course, that's how they've heard the name. And I'm like, no.
I just love that song.
We were around before that. It's actually named after my hometown. But anyway, what that did is it gave me a story. And it also gave me an opportunity to sell wine, because I sold that whole entire first vintage in my home state of Indiana.
And everybody loves a good story.
Everyone loves a good hometown boy makes good or starts something. So I was supported by people that I still don't forget. Some of those retailers, we try not to be in retail so much anymore. We're more on premise. We want to be in restaurants, but not so much retail, being a boutique producer. But there's a couple of those retailers that really started off with me that I'm like, I never want to forget you guys. You brought me to the dance. So I still make sure they have inventory of our wines and like that. So yeah, that's kind of got the ball rolling, got me some income coming in quicker than what I would have.
Now, to pause your story for a second. Now, did you grow up in a wine drinking family, or where did your appreciation for wine come from right out of college? Most people are still in the whiskey and beer stage?
Drew, that's a great question. I always say, because around here people say, I grew up with wine on the kitchen table. I'm Italian. I go, I grew up with milk on the kitchen table.
Yeah.
From the West, right? We had milk on the table, along with a lot of, meat and potatoes, yet milk. But anyway, so no, I did not grow up in a particular wine household like that. And if you ask where my passion for wine comes from, I always go back to that first harvest. Mm-hmm. I remember a particular instance, similar to that epiphany wine. People go like, I had this bottle of, whatever it was, it just rocked my world and really got me into wine. You have those wines that a lot of people in our industry that got them into wine. My epiphany moment, I see the winemaker come in with this Ziploc baggie full of berries of grapes from a berry sample from the vineyard. Mm-hmm. And I'd been like power washing floors and getting ready for harvest, wash and get ready. And it was the first sign I saw of grapes, actually. Uh-huh. Of course, I knew wine was made out of grapes, but there was something about seeing that. And then, of course, we smashed up those berries and got a sugar and a pH and, some of the parameters of ripeness there. But that was really cool for me because it was like, wow. And then, of course, as the grapes started coming in, and making the wine, it was really, so my love of wine came from that harvest, came from actually making wine. And it's not that I didn't drink wine, because I did a bit. Of course, didn't have the palate that I have now as much and so on. But it was really that the act of making wine, the agriculture, the bringing it in, and the having worked with a suit and tie, being in a desk, and now being in t-shirt and jeans and actually like doing physical labor, but not mindless physical labor where we're digging ditches. We're actually crafting and artistically, creating these grapes into wine. And it just hit me like, man, perfect. And I still look at this as I couldn't have found a better match for me as far as a career.
That's fantastic. So it's the whole like process of it that really evolved. And so the first year you did your 20 barrels of cab, and that was just in happenstance that you were able to find this extra juice. How did you lay out the groundwork to actually build Kokomo to what it is today?
That's a great question as well, man. And so basically after that 2004 vintage, right after bottling in that barn, that winery, and I was the assistant winemaker there, moved up to a different location, which was across the valley. We were in Dry Creek, but we were on West Dry Creek, and we moved across the valley to Dry Creek Road to this facility called Timbercrest Farms.
Okay.
And when we first moved in, I got to know the owner and the farmer. Mm-hmm. The farmer was a basketball coach, varsity basketball coach, and he'd been a basketball coach for 25 years at that point. I'm from Indiana. Uh-huh. Basketball's the deal. Yeah, we hit it off. His name's Randy Peters. He's the farmer, and he farms. At that point, he was farming 200 plus acres in Alexander Valley, Dry Creek, and Sonoma Coast. And so I remember talking to him, saying like, "Hey, you got this Sonoma Coast Russian River vineyard? You got any Pinot available?" This is 2005. Okay. Sideways just hit.
Oh yeah.
You couldn't find Pinot. I mean, even Pinot that wasn't coastal. This one happens to be 8 miles off the coast in this like superb site. Mm-hmm. But Pinot was the hottest commodity. Mm-hmm. And he was like, I think I might be able to slide you off a couple tons. And sure enough, I got 4 bins or 2 tons of his Pinot Noir that year. And then I said, how about some Zinfandel? And so from the estate here at Timbercrest, which is my now home, I got into this Old Vine Zin, which is this is a 120 acre vineyard. So from 2005, I started getting Timbercrest Zinfandel and Peter's Vineyard Pinot Noir. Okay. Which really set the course for what Kokomo became. I wouldn't say we make a good amount of cab, no doubt about it, but I'd say people probably know us for Zin and Pinot even more than cab now. That first Pinot, I knocked it out of the park and was able to get a big wine spectator score. I think even more importantly than that, Randy just really loved the wine that I made with that 2005 Peter's Vineyard, and that wine still shows beautiful. So I got his attention.
Let's him highlight all the fruits of his effort.
Yeah, and he's big on that. Peter's Vineyard, he always wants to taste the wines before he lets anybody put a vineyard designate name on it, because it's only 38 acres planted, and it's a lot of high-end wineries that get that fruit. And it's just such a special vineyard that he planted in 1982. So yeah, that was really cool. But I got to know Randy more, and through the years there, I got to know him even better. Went to some of his basketball games and such. In 2006, I think I started even buying. I bought Merlot from his home ranch that year that I still make from Pauline's Vineyard. So started to get even more fruit from him. I think it was about 2007 when I started to lay the groundwork for like, hey man, what do you say you come on as a partner? And that was a big move for me too. And he's like, partner, I got everything to lose. Like I have all these vineyards and, but truth be told, he's passionate about wine. His great grandfather owned a winery. He's fourth generation in Dry Creek, but he'd never been affiliated with a winery. And there is that kind of, pride in taking it from grape clear to the bottle and so on. Like I always joke and say, he plays golf. He can't hand someone on the golf course, here's what I do for a living, a Pinot Noir cluster, because it's like, well, it's got seeds, it's okay, but he can handle a bottle of Pinot, right? Made from his vineyard. So I think that piece of the puzzle was kind of interesting to him. Sure. Anyway, I got him to sign up as a partner. And at that point, we built the building we're in, the tasting room here up on the vineyard. And so we moved in January 2008 here. And that really changed Kokomo dramatically, because at that point, I was all distribution, most of which is in Indiana. But I picked up Ohio and Texas, a couple other states by that time. But because I didn't have a tasting room, the brand was all distribution. Excuse me.
Was the bulk of it going out of California?
There was really, I had a couple of local accounts in California. By far and away, those three states were taking most all of my production. Excuse me. When we opened up the tasting room, then now I have a tasting room. Now I can start a wine club. I can start direct to consumer. That really, I don't know what year it was, probably 2010, 2011, that it really shifted to more direct than distribution. Now, the way we sit, we're probably 70% direct to consumer out of the tasting room, wine club and so on, 30% distribution. It's a big part of our business. So
14 years. That's a pretty good shift over 14 years to go from mostly distribution to, and that's also a testament to the flavor and the quality of your wines, where most of those people sign up having already tasted it.
Yeah. And, as much as I'd like to pat myself on the back for that and say, just look how great of a winemaker I am. I would say there's two other keys to that. One, location. I'm on Dry Creek Road. We're connected to the town of Healdsburg. Healdsburg has just gone up, Michelin restaurants, so on. It's become certainly our destination of Sonoma County to come visit. So being right on Dry Creek Road. And having neighbors like Papa Pietro Perry up here is really good too. So we got, some good exposure from where we're at. And secondly, and certainly very important, is hospitality. And we pride ourselves on our tasting room. Ross James has been the tasting room manager here for 12 years. He is a hospitality wizard. And certainly I let him know, in Indiana, we have this thing we call Hoosier hospitality. And hospitality. Hoosier hospitality. We call ourselves Hoosiers.
The Hoosiers.
I'm a Boilermaker from Purdue, so it's not the Indiana Hoosiers, but all of us that were born in Indiana are kind of classified as Hoosiers. So anyway, we have this thing called Hoosier hospitality, which is really important in the Midwest and the South to have that level of hospitality, and it's something that we really pride ourselves on here. Is when you come in here, it's always a welcome, and it's our vibe with the barnwood. It kind of maybe I'll give a little tour around before I get off it. But I think that also is really important. People go, wow, it's really pretentious in there. And it's like, I take our wines very serious. And we make wines at the best level that we could possibly make them. But you don't have to be pretentious.
And that's key. That's key, especially in the region that you're at. There's a lot of wineries, which we won't name them, that their version of hospitality is not one that we would commonly consider very hospitable. It's an era of
there becomes a lot of entitlement.
You're lucky to be here.
Comes a lot of entitlement around wineries these days, unfortunately.
There can be, yeah. And it's just like, and I do tell people, I don't want to go down this soapbox, but it's like, no, man, wine is the more noble beverage than other alcoholic beverages. Those are typically made out of grains. Those are made out of row crops. Wine is very special because we make it out of 60, 80, 90-year-old vines. We get once a year to make wine, where you have these grains that you make beer and spirits out of, that you can make those products any day of the year. So it deserves its specialness. It deserves its, it is a very special beverage, but it doesn't have to be pretentious. I say I rot grapes, for God's sakes, right? I rot them in a very close, with my eye on them and so on, but it's what I do, ferment grapes. So anyway, speaking of which, I started a second project.
Yes, I want to talk to you about.
Before you go on to the second project, I just want to ask you, what is the logo? It's a tree.
Yeah, my tree logo. So with Kokomo, I think one of the first things I really thought about was like, wow, I remember I was at that other winery in the barn, and he had this PR person working for him, this lady, and I was like so excited about this. Like, I got this new label, and I showed it to her, and she was like, you can't call it Kokomo. She's like, people are just going to think of the song. It wasn't because of my hometown or anything. People are going to think of the song. You can't go. And I was kind of nervous, and I was like, well, this is kind of my story, and I've already picked it out, and this is where I'm going. I went forward with it. I've since seen her, which was awesome. And I didn't, it was just like, do you remember when you told me not to call my winery Kokomo? But I was worried about the song being where people would think that. So I think I was trying to get people away from that tropical Tom Cruise cocktail way down in Kokomo vibe. And I decided, you know what, the coastal cypress to me represents my move west. Yeah. It's the furthest growing west tree. It's on the coast. I come from Indiana, and now my logo represents my move west, which is this coastal cypress.
I just love it. So I had to ask.
Thank you. Yeah, it makes for good gear and stuff, and a cool logo. But yeah, that's kind of the story behind my cypress tree logo.
Well, that's awesome. Great. No, that's a good logo. Now, we're going to get into this brand new venture, but I think it's, before we get into it, the culmination of the last 20 years or so of your making wine. How has your winemaking style evolved over the last 20 years?
That's interesting. You asked that too, because it certainly has. I mean, it's evolved, and if I look back on it, to be quite honest with you, it's evolved by becoming a winemaker. It's like, this trade is typically handed down from your grandfather to your father to you. It's a generational thing. You don't, and as a young guy, you're like, I don't need that. I know how to make wine. I did know how to ferment grapes. These finer touches to winemaking, these little details and these finer touches are so important. And it's just something that takes time to learn. It takes time to have confidence and security with where you're at. You can sometimes dip your thief into a barrel and smell that wine and go like, oh my God, I'm ruined. It smells like, earthy, sweat socks, whatever, it's like, chill out. It's going through malactic. That's how it smells when it does that. That same wine, without doing anything to it, 2 months later, all of a sudden smells like what you would expect it to smell like. So there's that piece. But, my winemaking, the cool part about that question, Drew, is that my vineyards have remained the same since the beginning. Wow. I do say to people, I think my vineyards and the level of quality of vines or of grapes I've been working with has held me up until where I could catch it with the winemaking. I feel like I finally caught up to that with the winemaking as far as doing it serious. Just as I never put out bad wines, but it's just those nuanced things. And, like, for instance, like I say, it takes you 10 years to get to know a vineyard. That's seeing it through 10 vintages. Yeah. You think you know it after the first year because you have a character, but it was a character of that terroir, no doubt about it. But there was also a vintage there that dealt you whatever. If the first vintage you've seen something was 2020, you'd be like, oh my God, we had some issues, and there was smoke around, and there was different things like that. So, but then you see it through 2017 when we saw 115 degree temperature versus 2011 when we saw early rains and a very cool year. So it takes you, a good 10 years just to get the fill on the vineyard. And then along with that is like, how about which barrel to put on that vineyard? And that just takes time, because it takes time for that wine to age in that barrel. And then furthermore, after you bottle the wine, being able to see how it evolves and see, so you're really looking for the best match for coopers, which is the barrel makers. I, for instance, used to use a lot of American oak on Zinfandel, and I've since decided that American oak was a little too heavy-handed for me for my Zinfandel in particular, but also I picked my Zinfandel less ripe than I used to. So I picked it more ripe, which got some pretty high alcohols, which would kind of match that American oak. And as I leaned up the alcohol and picked it less ripe with better acid, of course, I needed to move to French oak and even Eastern European oak to be more elegant with that. A biggest change that I've made by far, but, and of course, people I've worked with, I have had my college roommate working with me at first, and he was awesome, worked with me for 10 years. And then he went on to pursue his own thing. And then I brought on Jeremy Parsons, who's now co-winemaker with me. I hired him as like an enologist, and he, worked for a couple of years and became assistant winemaker. And finally, and he came from working at Ramey for a long time, winery in different places. And he's a chemist and has, so he brings a lot to the table as well. And I think that has to be said. But one of the biggest things, and he brought this too, I didn't really start doing this until 2016 when he came on board, native yeast. Oh, I'm now 100% native yeast at Kokomo. Oh, wow. I remember his first harvest, and he's a chemist from UMass. I'm like, okay, we're going to inoculate this Pinot. And he was like, I have no clue how to do an inoculation. I'm like, you're kidding. Like, it's not that it's difficult. I'm like, he's like, I've never done it. Because where he worked at Ramey, they had never inoculated. It was all native yeast, So, and it gave me the confidence to go, wow, some of these larger wineries are doing that and so on. So now we go complete native yeast and don't use any commercial yeast. And I think that, I was intimidated by that.
Yeah, easy to be intimidated when you've seen
a lot can go wrong.
We've all seen a lot of things go wrong.
Yeah, I mean, you're like, what's the alcohol tolerance on this native yeast? I have no clue. And if it gives up on me, I'm left with the stuck fermentation, and so you really want to make sure that some of those.
Now, did you isolate the native yeast and then?
No.
Whatever it is what it's going to be.
Whatever comes in, and you would think that year to year that could be different. You would think certainly that the winery would have some bits of, like, luckily I'm in a winery with zero wood. The tasting room has some barnwood, but in the winery where the production is, we don't have any wood on the walls or anything. So that helps us to keep things really, sanitized and to keep that yeast population down. But we are in a winery, so you do have that. But no, it's kind of cool when you bring in the grapes, you have that. I realize why the big guys don't do it, the larger wineries, because you're waiting 5-6 days. You pick the fruit at 58 degrees. It takes a while for it to warm up to start fermenting.
Yeah.
So you're trying to turn fermenters over in a larger winery, where I'm like, I've been in here for a week and it's fairly fermenting, and it does take more time, more patience and so on like that. But I've had nothing but success. And it just feels right to not add anything to the wines. I really, even with Kokomo, just believe that the best way to make wines is to be, make them in the vineyard and just try to shepherd them into the bottle, as Randy would say, is a winemaker. So, yeah.
And that's kind of a perfect segue to your new venture, which is a completely separate type of winemaking style, but also is kind of the next step of the evolution now that you're kind of using native yeast and you're just kind of allowing the wine to do what the wine does at Kokomo. Talk to me about this breaking bread. I'm fascinated about it.
Yeah, that's been really cool for me. I would start off by saying, we all kind of, if you've been in the wine industry for a while or been a fan of wines and so on, we kind of all remember this thing that happened in about 2007 or 8 or really 2010 maybe when it started, where everyone was like, lower alcohols. We've got Parkerized, they called it, because everyone was making these big wines. And we had In Pursuit of Balance, which was this group that a lot of people were following, which was like lower alcohol stuff. And then all of a sudden I started to see this natural wine coming on the scene as I'd be working markets, and particularly like some of the best restaurants in New York and LA and stuff were into this natural wine. And it really just, got my attention. And at first it was kind of like, wow, this is just a fad. This is just a thing. And then I kind of like, was like, I think it was my Georgia distributor that really, had a lot of those natural wines. We went to dinner and tasted some of them. And I was like, wow, it's delicious. That's really good.
Now for our listeners,
I was going to say,
Define natural wine, because a lot of people have a different mental image of what that is.
The tough part is that there is no like formal definition. I mean, if you were to define organic wine, because there is a formal definition, you have a parts per million of SO2. That's a threshold that you would, go up to 30 parts per million. And of course, that the fruit has to be grown certified organic. But you can add anything to those wines that you would want to add to those wines, as long as it's certified organic, right? So you could add nutrients, you could add commercial yeast, you could add tannins, enzymes, any of those things that you may want to add to that wine, as long as it was certified organic. Really, and I have to say that because of the natural philosophy is, I say it's kind of a nod to winemaking 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, is to add nothing to the wine, maybe a bit of SO2, because SO2 kind of keeps bottle variation at bay, at least at bottling. But most natural wine makers and natural wineries really don't use SO2 maybe until bottling. So even through primary fermentation. So although there's not, and it's certainly working with at least certified sustainable, no glyophosphates, but preferably organic farm, and even preferably, certified organic or biodynamic, as the two main vineyards we work with Breaking Bread are organically farmed, and one of them certified, and one of them will be certified here in the next year. But so those are definitely kind of parameters, but there is a flavor profile and a uniqueness to natural wines. I mean, first and foremost, and I think it's really cool in how it's changing the wine industry a bit. Like, it's okay to see a wine that's not been sterile filtered. It's completely clear. And I'm not saying like floaties in the wine, but like maybe you'll have a little bit of lees on the cork or sediment. It's okay not to have to cold stabilize and heat stabilize your whites. We add bentonite, which is a natural clay. It's not a big deal, and it's organic to these to white wines, just so we don't have to make them heat stable, and it fines the wines and the proteins in the wines, just so we don't have a haze, a slight.
So that they're clear, right?
So that they're clear, and it's like, I get it when you pick up that bottle at the market and that Sauvignon Blanc is crystal clear, it's delicious, but we may change the conversation, and people may actually find that everyone I drink that's got a little bit that's not clear has more complexity and flavor and so on. And, so there's that. And then there's this kind of, there always, when you mention the natural wine on reds, there's always this nod to Cru Beaujolais.
Yeah.
Part of that goes to the philosophy of making wine like 1,000 or 2,000 years ago. We don't stem. It's all whole clustered.
Yeah.
So
back in the day, I used to sell a lot of Kermit Lynch wines, and he's got the
Gang of Four,
unrefined, unfiltered, the Gang of Four. So whenever I think of natural wine, I'm thinking of LaPierre and those
absolutely.
Guys.
And I would call them the fathers. Excuse me. Yeah.
Is the shelf life going to be the same on these natural wines, or and by shelf life I mean like the ageability? Are you going to be able to age these cabs?
Yeah. So what's funny that you don't see a lot of cab in the natural wine world. It's funny that you don't see. So the category as a whole too, fresh wines, wines that are delicious, that would be, so they're not like Kokomo. It's imperative that I make these wines that in 10 and 15 years show beautiful and show their ageability, because with the classic brand, you want to attract the collectors, and you're not attracting collectors unless you have ageability. With the Breaking Bread wines, it's not about that. It's pop and go. It's not even about decanting so much. I don't want to say that they're not worth the time to decant, because a little air to them can actually show complexity. Actually, these reds we like to drink with a little chill on them.
Oh, yes.
Slightly chilled, and stuff. So the category with the pet nats and the natural reds and some of this stuff is like really, and so, yes, they definitely, I had a 2019 last night, my Breaking Bread Zinfandel. It's not like under cork that they're going to spoil, but they're not really meant to age in the same way. So think of them as like traditional winery Sauvignon Blanc and Rosé, not to the degree like I have to have this year's fresh vintage, but meant to drink a little bit more fresh.
That being said, some of those, like going back to the Gang of Four, some of those Beaujolais age incredibly well, 10, 15, easy.
And that's true. And I want to think that some of these reds with natural wines are able to do that. And certainly there are others people that make natural wine that maybe go, hey, I'm trying to make mine that really do age. I mean, one of the things you have in natural wines when you're making reds is you have this whole other, and we could have a whole segment on this, carbonic maceration, which includes the stem in fermentation. And so for me, and then something else to be said about the natural wine category, low alcohol. I always say, when I grew up and I went to my family, my parents' anniversary dinner, it was a birthday dinner. Where'd we go in the Midwest? We went to a steakhouse.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was a fancy restaurant in the 80s. We went to a nice steakhouse. Well, now moving forward, it's a different deal. And people are eating at these farm to table, chef owned restaurants. The cuisine has lightened up quite a bit. And they don't need a big, bold wine to be paired with them. You may lose the food. It may be a little overpowering. So these lower alcohol, more delicate wines tend to pair better with some of these lighter dishes and so on too. So in saying that, lower alcohol means what? Lower alcohol means picking less ripe.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you can have actually what I call searing acid. And searing acid hurts your palate.
Mm-hmm.
You can also have green tannins. Mm-hmm. Right? And green tannins are not necessarily plush and easy to drink. So in California, to make low alcohol wines with our amount of sunshine and our lack of virus, that's another kind of, topic as well. Lack of virus. Everything comes from UC Davis, heat treated, and we have all these, virus-free vines. They go up to 26 bricks and they haven't even started to senesce. We still have green leaves. It's not even turned yellow yet, right? Mm-hmm. So to make low alcohol wines where we're picking at 22 bricks of sugar, lower sugars like that, you have the threat of a lot of, like I said, green tannin searing acid. But what is really cool about that, taking a nod from Beaujolais, is that when you do the whole cluster, you have the stem included in fermentation, and that stem has potassium. That potassium raises the pH, converts that searing acid to like a crunchy acidity, and gives us a big shift in pH up. So it is really a way to be able to make these lower alcohol wines more balanced.
I love it too, though, because, these are good wines that are affordable, and you're not feeling like you have to, feeling guilty when you go to open it, or it's like, oh, is this ready to open yet? I don't know. We probably need to hold on to this more. I mean, this is like, grab a nice bottle of wine that's ready to drink now, and you don't have to feel bad when you open it. It's awesome.
Maybe even a weekday wine.
Yeah. All the time.
Yeah, all the time. Yeah. So
now, when you're saying low alcohol, what are you talking about?
I got a Grenache that I put out, a red Grenache that I put out 11.7 alcohol.
11.7.
And that's pretty low. That's the lowest alcohol. Low. But that's and that thing is shows better with that little chill on it. Zinfandel, maybe 13.2. Petnat, in the 11, 12 range, in rosé like that. So yeah, the reds, nothing ever goes above 13% alcohol, or 13.5 alcohol or something like that.
Which is kind of funny, because now I've got a wine cellar, and I've been selling wine since about 93. So I've got wood barrels, not wood barrels, the wine boxes going back to the 70s in Napa, and all the big names are on there. And I see the alcohol every time I go in there. And back in the day, all the alcohol was 13 to 13.5. That was your standard before, because the yeast couldn't get, until the mid 90s when they had the super strains of yeast, you couldn't really get more than 14% out of the yeast.
Well, and let's face it too. You had the farmers on the other end that was like, "Are we gonna pick yet?" Yeah, because as grapes get riper, they may dehydrate. As they dehydrate, the weight goes down. The farmer gets paid per ton. There was a lot of us also being able to raise the price to the farmer to have them hang that fruit out there riper. And then the farmer came in the winery and saw you with a hose putting water into their grapes because you picked them so ripe that you needed to bring the sugar down. And they're just horrified by the fact that you let their fruit hang out there that long to start to pucker up, and didn't only to put water in it and so on. So, there was a lot to that, but now, and there's certainly still wineries and great wineries that make big, rich, ripe wines, and certainly a target audience for those. So
you're a couple vintages in now to Breaking Bread.
I am. Yeah, Breaking Bread has allowed me to be fun with labels, man. You should see my labels. I wish I had them by me, but the labels on the Breaking Bread stuff is more colorful, a little, so I can let's be honest that, the category of people, or the demographic of people who are really hot on natural wines, happens to be younger millennials and things, which is so cool. I mean,
Yeah, you've got one with a girl playing that looks like a ukulele on it, I think.
Yeah, I've got an octopus. I've got an
octopus.
Yeah, so I got some mushrooms on one.
So how many are you making total then? Because I've only seen 4.
Okay, I think I have about 6, 7 SKUs for Breaking Bread. Probably bring on another 7th this year. So I'm having fun with it, I mean, and at the same time, let's talk about it's not all. So I've been wanting to do the Chinon Cab Franc, natural Cab Franc, all whole cluster. I love those wines; they're so delicious. I have Cab Franc planted in my wife and I's vineyard, organic vineyard, and 2 years in a row, 19 and 20, or no, excuse me, 20 and 21. 2 years in a row, I brought this fruit in for Breaking Bread whole cluster, and it went south. It got really high VA, and I had to dump it, before it was even done fermenting. I didn't even press it first. It was like it had that. And so you learn a lot, when you don't add SO2 to grapes, when you bring them in, you're playing with fire. And it's not to say that everything's a success. There's certainly those, and that was thousands of dollars, I mean, I don't make huge productions, but it cost me thousands of dollars to dump that, and so, yeah.
I would love to see a Chinon style Cab Franc domestic. And that's my go-to wine on the weekdays. We drink a lot of Chinons in our house.
I'm going to go a 3rd year. My partner, Randy's like, you're done. You're putting it to Kokomo. I make it for Kokomo too, the Cab Franc, where I destem it and don't do a whole cluster. I pick it riper. I add SO2, and it turned out gorgeous. And it's like, oh man, but I like to share that story because it's real. That's like,
is it a lot less work making these natural wines then?
Interesting enough, it's like, I don't have to run them through a destemmer, but there's a lot of sorting that comes through because you want to make sure there's no leaves or nothing in there. These whole clusters, there's nothing. I tell them, if you wouldn't put it in your mouth, don't put it in my bin, when we're sorting through it. So there's that piece. There's not a lot of punch downs because it's done carbonic like that. After the wine is made, we top it twice as often as we do our classic wines because they no SO2 ever. So we're really afraid of oxidation. So I want to make sure that, every other week at the least that we're topping these wines, make sure there's no headspace in that barrel, which would be oxygen, which would be detrimental. So a little more work on that front. It's just, one thing you don't think about in these natural wines, when you do carbonic, everything's hand-picked. So I'm trying to come out with these price points that are in the mid-20s retail. One way you can save money is say, okay, you can machine harvest my fruit. Well, you can't machine harvest this style. It has to be hand-picked because it has to be carbonic, the whole cluster, the stem, and everything included.
Otherwise, you'll get a bunch of butterflies and caterpillars and all types of stuff in there.
Right, and you wouldn't have a whole cluster, to be able to ferment like that. So, work-wise, it's like, it's still a lot. I'll be honest, it's getting easier every year as I come up with kind of a protocol for it, if you will. Like those first couple of years, it was like, dude, I have no idea where we're going to go for this. Like I've read about it, how other people are doing it and so on. And I'm going to stick to the philosophy of we're really not adding any SO2. And I'm not, when you say SO2, that's one thing. How about nutrients? I'm working with old vine zin. I'm working with 80-year-old vine zin. When that comes in, it is low nitrogen. Okay. Those vines don't pick up nitrogen from the soil in the same way a young vine would because they're very old. And typically those GANs, which are yeast available nitrogen, one of the first things we look at to add nutrients, you would see those and you'd be like, wow, this needs nutrient because it's going to have an off fermentation. There's not enough nitrogen to get through. So, but we stick to the philosophy of nothing added at all. I think this natural category really got its legs underneath it from what was going on in the wine industry with these large production wines, adding a lot of concentrate, adding a lot of products. We're all familiar with that Mega Purple, which is the main one people know, but other products as well to try to hit a palate profile. And it's like, hold on a minute. Luckily, these young kids were like, you're putting what in my wine? And it's not on the back label because you don't have the ingredients on the back label.
Yeah. So Erik, where so this Breaking Bread, is this all direct to consumer or is this in distribution at all?
The Breaking Bread is the way Kokomo started. It's 100% distribution right now.
Oh, is it? Okay.
I mean, I show it here. We have a couple tasting rooms here at Kokomo, so there's definitely the ability by appointment to taste Breaking Bread wines here, and we do certainly because we have trade people and stuff that come up and want to taste it. But really, yeah, by far and away. And I plan to open a tasting room up, at some point for Breaking Bread. It's just right now I want to really focus on getting the brand built, and getting it out there, and it's in probably 15, 20 states.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah, I mean, restaurants is where we try to focus. We feel like it's a food wine, hence the name Breaking Bread. So
That looks great. I love your About Us story. Kind of takes the course of a staggered meal from the amuse bouche all the way down to the dessert. Very creative with the way you wrote that.
well, when I have my wine club, I'm a deadhead, a little bit. So when I have my wine club, I'm going to call them the breadheads.
Nice.
Right?
I like it. I like it.
A little tour around.
Yeah, give us a tour as we're winding down here, Erik. Where can people learn more about Kokomo and breaking bread?
You certainly can come to our website, KokomoWines.com, BreakingBreadWines.com, and come here to the winery. We're open 7 days a week. We love to have people see my Kokomo jersey up there.
Yeah.
So I have a little Purdue love, but then this whole wall here is everything from Kokomo. Old stuff from Kokomo that I've just collected over the years.
I love it.
It's random, but it's kind of me, and it's definitely,
Eclectic.
like I said, we don't take ourselves too pretentiously here. We have this huge roll-up door that looks out to the vineyard there, and then my welcome to Kokomo sign that the mayor sent me.
Oh, look at that.
Hometown of Erik Miller, right?
That's great. Did you drive into town?
Right. Yeah. So anyway, that's that one. And then I have yet another tasting room in here, which we have people tasting, but that's okay. And then this room looks like this with some of the barrels.
Oh, nice.
Our bar there. Merch. And then I have my fancy barrel room there with my new concrete fermenter, which is my favorite toy right there.
Oh yeah, those are cool.
And then that's my chandelier with a barrel turned inside out there.
I haven't seen that one yet. That's pretty cool. Now, have you used that concrete fermenter yet?
This will be the first year for the concrete fermenter. Yeah.
They're awesome.
Super cool. This is
they add some really great mineralization.
Yeah, I'm super. They're expensive, but I'm super stoked to make my first.
Europe's been using them for years, but they're now like the past 10 years has become really popular out here, and they're awesome.
That's my manhole cover from Kokomo, Indiana, that I turned into a table. See it?
That's great.
City sewer. So yeah, that's my show off of my place, man. So
that looks great. I can't wait to visit.
But yeah, no, it's been a lot of fun. Overall, I have to just, sometimes pinch myself. You come from Kokomo, Indiana, you start a thing, it actually works. That's
got to be proud of that.
It's been an amazing thing. And then to think that I could start a second label in breaking bread, and I shouldn't say second label. I always make sure to say it's not a second label. It's an entirely new thing. And for me as a winemaker, very cool because it's a whole new challenge and a whole new different way of making wine. So.
No, that's fantastic. Well, Erik, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Erik.
My pleasure, you guys. Really enjoyed being on with you guys. Thanks for showing me the time. And yes, would love to host you guys when you come out this way.
Absolutely. You have a great day and successful harvest.
Thank you. Thank you. You will. All right. Bye, Bianca. Bye, dear.
Thanks for listening to the Legends Behind the Craft podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.